the wind carved the pass, long before men tried to name it. It howled through the granite walls like a living thing, scraping stone into memory and turning careless travelers back before they ever reached the summit. Andrea Whitmore stood at the edge of it, notebook tucked beneath her arm, skirts snapping against her boots, and wondered briefly if words were enough armor for a place like this. She had crossed deserts and river towns, rail camps and dust-choked settlements, chasing the truth of frontier life for Eastern readers who would never smell pine sap or taste cold iron in the air. But the wind-carved pass was different. Even the locals spoke of it in lowered voices, as though the mountains themselves might overhear. "You still set on going through?" a voice asked behind her. Andrea turned. The man stood easy, one boot on a rock, hat brim shadowing eyes, the color of weathered steel. Colt Mercer. The guide everyone had told her to hire if she wanted to live long enough to file her story. He looked like the land-scarred, patient and unimpressed by ambition. "I didn't come this far to turn back," Andrea said. "The pass is the story." Colt's mouth twitched. Not quite a smile. "Pass don't care about stories. That's why people need them," she replied. He studied her a moment longer, as if weighing her spine against the mountain's will. She met his gaze without flinching. Andrea had learned early that men mistook steadiness for stubbornness, and stubbornness for foolishness. She was neither, she was committed. "All right," Colt said at last. "But we leave before the sun climbs. Wind's calmer then, relatively." They set out at dawn. The trail narrowed quickly, winding between sheer rock faces, streaked with lichen and ice. Andrea kept pace, breath steady, fingers aching with the need to write even as she focused on every careful step. Colt moved ahead, sure-footed and silent, his rifle slung low, his presence a constant line between her and disaster. "You always this quiet?" she asked after an hour. "Wind does enough talking," he said. "I listen." Andrea smiled. Despite the cold, she scribbled a note. When they paused for water, the guide treats the land like a conversation, not a conquest. As they climbed higher, the wind found them. It roared through the pass, tugging at coats and thoughts alike, carrying with it a low, mournful sound that set Andrea's nerves on edge. "What is that?" she asked. "Mountain singing," Colt replied. "Means weather's turning." Snow began to fall, not the gentle kind but sharp, sideways needles that stung the skin. Visibility dropped to a few yards. Colt slowed, waiting until Andrea was beside him. "We'll shelter soon," he said. "Cave up ahead. If the drift don't bury it." They reached the narrow opening just as the storm worsened. Inside, the air was still, cold but merciful. Colt built a small fire while Andrea rubbed life back into her hands. "You ever scared?" she asked softly, watching the flames lick at the dark. "Every time," he said. "Fear keeps you honest." Andrea wrote that down too. As night pressed in, the storm raged outside, sealing them in. Andrea realized then that this journey was no longer just observation. It was participation. The story wasn't ahead of her, was here, breathing in the dark, sitting across the fire with a man who knew the mountains better than most men knew themselves. And somewhere between the wind's fury and the fire's quiet warmth, Andrea felt the first shift, like a sentence turning into something more than words. Morning came without sunrise. The storm still clawed at the mountainside, its voice muffled by stone, but no less insistent. Andrea woke stiff and cold, her blanket smelling faintly of smoke and pine. Across the dying embers, Colt was already awake, sharpening his knife with slow, steady strokes. "You sleep at all?" she asked. "Enough," he said. "Storm's easing, but the pass won't forgive us for lingering." Andrea sat up, stretching sore muscles. She reached for her notebook out of habit, then hesitated. Writing felt different now. The mountain wasn't a subject, it was a presence. Colt noticed the pause. "Something wrong with your words?" he asked. She smiled faintly. "They're catching up." They stepped back onto the trail, once the wind softened from a scream to a warning growl. Snow coated the rocks in a deceptive sheen, turning every step into a negotiation. Colt moved ahead, cutting a careful path, occasionally reaching back to steady Andrea over the worst stretches. His grip was firm, sure, and brief, never lingering, yet grounding. "You guide many journalists?" Andrea asked. "Few," he said. "Most don't like hearing their lives depend on listening." "And you," she pressed, "why take this job?" Colt shrugged. "Money's honest. And folks telling the truth about this land, there ain't many left." Andrea glanced at him, surprised. "You think I'll tell the truth?" "I think you're trying to," he said. "That's rarer than truth itself." They climbed in silence after that, the kind that didn't beg to be filled. The pass narrowed until the world became rock, sky, and the thin line of trail beneath their boots. Andrea's lungs burned, but she refused to slow him down. Then, the ground shifted. It was subtler. Low-grown beneath the snow butt, Colt reacted instantly, shoving Andrea toward the rock wall as a sheet of ice broke loose below them. Stones and snow thundered down the slope, vanishing into the white void. Andrea's heart hammered as Colt shielded her, one arm braced against the wall, the other gripping her shoulder. When the sound faded, the silence felt louder than the avalanche itself. "You all right?" he asked, breath tight. "Yes," she said, voice shaking. He nodded, then let go, stepping back as if aware suddenly of how close they stood. "You don't have to write everything," Colt said, noticing. "I know," she replied. "But some things deserve remembering." She wrote about the sound of the mountain breaking, about fear tasting like metal, about the steady weight of a stranger's arm keeping her upright. She did not write his name, not yet. By afternoon, clouds thinned, revealing jagged peaks etched against a pale sky. The pass opened briefly, offering a view so vast Andrea forgot the cold. She gasped. "No paper can hold that," she whispered. Colt watched her, not the view. "That's why people come back changed," he said. "Land like this don't let you pass through untouched." As they made camp that night, Andrea shared dried apples from her pack. Colt brewed bitter coffee that warmed them both. The fire crackled, stars pricking through the clearing sky. "You ever wish you'd left?" Andrea asked. Colt stared into the flames. "Sometimes, but then I'd be someone else. And I ain't sure I'd like him." Andrea understood that, more than she expected. She closed her notebook, letting the story rest between them. For now, the wind returned at dawn. Not angry this time, but persistent, like a reminder that the mountains were still listening. Andrea woke to the smell of coffee and the sight of Colt crouched near the fire, his movements practiced and calm. There was something comforting in his routines, as though the day itself followed his lead. They packed quickly. The trail ahead dropped steeply, curling through a corridor of stone polished smooth by centuries of wind and ice. Colt tested each step before moving, offering Andrea guidance with short, clear words. "Left foot. Now wait. All right, move." She trusted him, without question. That realization settled deeper than she expected. By mid-morning, clouds rolled in again, carrying fog that swallowed distance and sound. The world narrowed to the space between them, their breath fogging the air in quiet rhythm. "If you ever write about yourself?" Colt asked suddenly. Andrea blinked. "Rarely. Readers don't care who's holding the pen." "Maybe they should," he said. "Stories come from somewhere." She considered that. "If I wrote about myself, I'd have to be honest." Colt nodded. "Hardest kind." They reached a ridge where the wind cut hard, forcing them to crouch low. Andrea slipped once, heart leaping, but Colt caught her easily, pulling her close to his chest until her boots found solid ground. This time, neither of them moved away right away. "Thank you," she said softly. "You don't have to thank me for doing my job," he replied. But his voice lacked its usual distance. They made camp early, hemmed in by fog. The fire was small, their rations smaller. Conversation came in fragments, shaped by the quiet. Andrea told him about the city she'd left behind, brick streets, crowded rooms, editors who chased sensation more than substance. Colt spoke of the pass, of learning its moods from an old trapper who'd raised him after his parents died crossing west. The mountain gave me something to belong to, he said, even when it takes. Andrea listened, her pen untouched. Some stories weren't meant for ink. That night, the temperature dropped sharply. The wind wormed through their shelter, and Andrea shivered despite her coat. Without a word, Colt shifted closer, draping an extra blanket around her shoulders. Their proximity was practical, necessary, but it sparked a warmth deeper than the fire. "You afraid of tomorrow?" Andrea asked quietly. "Always," Colt said. "But I'm more afraid of standing still." Andrea smiled into the darkness. "I think that's why I write." Sleep came slowly, heavy with unspoken thoughts. Morning brought danger again. The fog lifted just enough to reveal a narrow traverse etched into the mountainside. Below it nothing. Wind surged through the gap, threatening balance with every step. "Stay close," Colt said. "Match my pace." Halfway across, Andrea's foot skidded. She gasped, arms flailing. Colt spun, grabbing her just as the wind surged. The force knocked them both to the rock. Colt braced over her, shielding her body with his own. For a moment, time froze. Andrea could hear his heart pounding, feel the tension in his muscles, the warmth of his breath against her cheek. The mountain roared around them, indifferent. When the wind eased, Colt didn't move right away. Neither did Andrea. "You all right?" he asked again, softer now. "Yes," she said. "Because of you." Their eyes met. No words, no defenses, just truth, raw as the stone beneath them. They finished the crossing in silence. But something had shifted. The mountain still tested them, but the distance between guide and journalist had narrowed into something certain, understanding shaped by danger, trust, and the quiet weight of what neither dared name yet. The land softened as they descended, though the mountain never truly loosened its grip. Pines replaced bare rock, their dark needles whispering as the wind threaded through them. The trail widened just enough to breathe again. Andrea hadn't realized how tightly she'd been holding herself until her shoulders finally eased. "Colt noticed pass behind us," he said. "Worst of it, anyway." Andrea nodded, glancing back once. The wind-carved pass stood tall and unreadable, as if daring them to tell its story wrong. They followed a stream fed by melting snow, its clear water racing over stone. Andrea knelt to refill her canteen, watching sunlight fracture across the surface. "It's strange," she said. "All that danger, and then this." Colt smiled faintly. "Mountains don't hold grudges. They just are." They walked on, conversation coming easier now. Andrea asked about the settlements beyond the range, about the people who made lives where maps ended. Colt told her names, places, losses, his voice steady but not detached. She realized he wasn't just guiding her through land, but through memory. By afternoon, they reached a small abandoned cabin tucked into the trees. Its roof sagged, door hanging loose, but it offered shelter. "We can rest here," Colt said. Storms building again. Inside, the cabin smelled of dust and old smoke. Andrea traced her fingers along the rough wall. "Someone lived here once," she murmured. "Lots of someones," Colt replied. "Most moved on. Few didn't make it." They lit a fire. Andrea finally opened her notebook, writing not about hardship but resilience, how people carved lives from unforgiving places, how love and loss lived side by side in frontier soil. Colt watched her write, something unreadable in his expression. "You going back east after this?" he asked. "Yes," she said slowly. "That's where the paper is." "And then?" he pressed. Andrea hesitated. The future had always been a line she'd chase once she reached it. Now it felt closer than she expected. "I don't know," she admitted. That night, thunder rolled through the mountains. Rain battered the cabin roof, steady and loud. The fire burned low. Andrea felt the weight of what waited beyond the trail, the separation they hadn't spoken aloud. "Colt," she said softly, "when this story's printed, you'll just be a name." He met her gaze. Names fade. Moments don't. The truth of that settled between them, heavy and honest. Andrea closed the distance herself this time, resting her head against his shoulder. Colt stiffened briefly, then relaxed, one arm wrapping around her back. They didn't kiss. They didn't need to. The closeness was enough shared warmth, shared breath, shared knowing that something rare was taking shape. By morning, the storm had passed. The trail ahead led toward open land, settlements, endings. Andrea packed her notebook, heart full and uncertain. "Whatever you write," Colt said as they stepped outside, "make it yours." She smiled at him, eyes bright. "I will." And for the first time, Andrea wondered if the truest story she carried wouldn't be found in ink at all but in the memory of a mountain, a man and a journey that had changed her course forever. They reached the edge of the frontier by late afternoon, where the mountains loosened into rolling hills, and the trail widened enough to welcome wagons and weary travelers. Smoke curled from distant chimneys. Life ordinary, noisy, undeniable waited just ahead. Andrea slowed her steps. So did Colt. "This is where my work ends," he said, gesturing toward the valley. His voice was calm, but his eyes held something unsettled, like a river beneath ice. Andrea nodded, though her chest tightened. She had imagined this moment during the long nights in the pass, but imagination had softened the edges. Reality was sharper. "You've brought me through more than mountains," she said quietly. Colt gave a small smile. "You walked it yourself. I just knew where not to step." They stopped near a split in the trail. One path led toward town, toward trains and deadlines and printed pages. The other curved back into the wild, disappearing beneath trees and sky. Andrea opened her notebook one last time, not to write, but to close it. "I used to think stories were something you captured," she said. "Now I think they're something you carry, and sometimes something that carries you." Colt studied her, then reached into his pocket and pressed a small, smooth stone into her palm, shed by wind and water. "From the pass," he said. "So you remember it true." Her fingers curled around it. "I don't think I could forget. Not even if I tried." Silence stretched between them, not empty, but full of shared danger, quiet nights, unspoken affection. The kind of silence that only comes when two people have truly seen each other. Andrea took a breath. "When this article's finished, I won't make you a myth." He raised a brow. "I'll write you honest," she continued. "The man, not the legend." Colt nodded. "That's all anyone can ask." The wind stirred, gentle now, threading through grass and pine alike. Andrea stepped closer. This time, when Colt reached for her, neither of them hesitated. The kiss was soft, unhurried, shaped by restraint and trust rather than urgency. When they parted, nothing felt taken, only shared. "I don't know where I'll be in a year," Andrea said, "but I know this: whatever I write next will be different." "Because you crossed the pass," Colt said. "And because of you," he smiled then, fully. "This time mountains change people. So do stories." They stood a moment longer, memorizing the shape of each other, the sound of breathing, the weight of what had been. Then Andrea turned toward the valley. She walked until the town sounds reached her voices. Wheels, life moving forward. She did not look back. Colt watched until she disappeared, then turned toward the trail that led home. The wind rose briefly, brushing past him like a familiar hand. Weeks later, in a city far from stone and snow, Andrea's article ran. Readers spoke of danger and beauty, of frontier truth and human courage. But the most powerful lines were quiet ones, about trust, about listening, about how some journeys leave marks no ink can fully hold. And somewhere, in the mountains, the wind-carved pass kept its secrets, satisfied to know that one of them had been told true. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more Western stories.